All right. Hi, everyone. Kathy Whittem here from Parenting Beyond Words, where connection matters more than perfection. Today, I'm really excited to be bringing in Tina Hart, an ADHD coach and specialist. Several of my parents have been having challenges with their kids at home, with school at home, and dealing with ADHD. And parents are wearing so many hats these days, not just teacher, not just parent, not just working at home, but with school, they could be trying to wear a hat of special ed teacher. And that's a lot. It's really more than can be kept on a head at one time. So I want to introduce Tina to you. I'm going to glance at her bio so I don't miss anything. So welcome, Tina. It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
So Tina Hart works with college students and professionals who live with ADHD or anxiety. With a master's degree in counseling and as a board-certified coach, she brings more than 30 years of experience to her clients. Her priority with her clients is to enable them to take ownership of their mental health and their lives and to live a productive life with ease and joy. That sounds fantastic, Tina.
I'll do my best.
Is there anything else what'd you say?
I said I do my best.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. So what else would you like to us to know about you?
Well, I had a windy path to getting to the ADHD coaching. I started out as a psychotherapist with a master's degree in counseling and worked in public mental health, and then worked in a private pastoral counseling center, and then in my own private practices. This is my third private practice I've had in my career. And the reason I got attracted to coaching is because I was working as a K through 8 school counselor in a parochial school setting. And I noticed that there were some kids who were really bright, but could never stay out of trouble and couldn't show how bright they were with their grades. You know, I would notice that their grades would be real high at the beginning of the semester, and then they would just bottom out in October, and then they'd be scrambling to get the C at the end. But the C wasn't reflective of how much they learned, and it wasn't reflective of how bright they were. So I got really curious about that. I started studying everything I could. I noticed that they were all ADHD. And so I started going to every training I could, reading books about it, studying with some authorities in the field about it. And I started a little before school group. And it was I only had 23 minutes. So instead of going to, their before care area, they would come to the library, and I had 23 minutes to work with them. And within 6 weeks, their grades had come up. They had more self-esteem. They were feeling more confident. They were much more consistent with doing their work. And they loved the group. They loved coming in there. They loved the accountability. I started doing parent groups in conjunction with it to explain to them what I was doing and how the parents could support at home. And I was just emboldened by the success of that, so that when I moved away from doing the school counseling, I decided to start a practice working exclusively with ADHD kids and kids with anxiety. So in the beginning, I only worked with kids. Then I moved into working with kids and parents, and now I work with kids, parents, and professionals.
Cool. I'm hearing you tying together ADHD and anxiety, which is interesting. I'd like to hear a little more about that, because I know in my practice, one of the core principles is that behavior is communication. And one of the things it communicates is anxiety through behaviors. Um,
Yeah.
so tell me a little more about that link.
So about 50% of all students who have ADHD have something else with it. So it might be a learning disability, it might be anxiety, it might be depression. It can be a host of things. But what I see a lot of, especially with girls who have ADHD, is that the anxiety goes with it.
Mm,
Because boys are sometimes more on the hyperactive end of the ADHD spectrum, and you can see it easier and you can diagnose it faster. But a
mm,
lot of girls are more inattentive. And so they just kind of space out, feel separated from their peers, know they're missing something, but don't know what they're missing. And then that's when the anxiety can get started and really ramp
mm.
up. So with girls, sometimes you don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Was it the ADHD that caused the anxiety or the anxiety that caused the ADHD symptoms? But my own daughter had that profile. And once I learned it by living with her, I started seeing it more and more and more amongst a lot of the girls that I work with. Boys also sometimes have anxiety, but predominantly a lot of girls will lead with it.
Oh, that's interesting, because as soon as that anxiety kicks in, now their brain is not working anymore. And
Right. And they develop more executive skill weaknesses.
mhm.
Yeah. The two things kids need to learn is they need to be fed and they need to be calm.
Wow.
So if they have, a full belly and a calm mind, they will do great and they'll enjoy their learning.
I love that. It's really core needs. It's their core
Mhm.
physical need, and then their core emotional and cognitive need, to be
Right.
able to learn. Um,
Mhm.
how would you take that over to um, the parents that are struggling at home right now? Um, I've heard that there's a lot of challenge with getting their kids to do their work. The whole format is different. A lot of uncertainty about how things are going to go forward. Um, so doing school at home is something that may or may not change in the near future. Um,
Right.
and so there's a lot of struggle with work coming in and trying to get kids to do their work, but their whole environment is different. There are no peers, no teacher. How would you, is there like a top one or two tips, which I understand, like as a coach, it's hard to pare it down to that. But
Mhm.
what would be practical that these parents might be able to implement if their kids have ADHD, or I deal with stress sensitive kids that have often anxiety? It can be a similar manifestation with the kids, I think, of the resistance and the leading into power struggles and all that. What would you recommend to these parents for them to focus on?
So I think the first thing I would recommend is an abundance of compassion for both themselves and their children.
I love that.
Um, just, I mean, literally the bathe one another in compassion, hold one another with as much tenderness and love and mercy and grace as you can, because online schooling is contraindicated for ADHD brains, period.
Mm.
And it's extremely overwhelming and contraindicated in most cases with anxiety. So if you keep in mind, this is what I like to explain to parents about online learning. When you have a little bit of a neurotypical brain, what your brain does is it goes on overdrive to find compensatory skills, and it's very, very good at it. So starting in kindergarten, you can see other little kids looking around and getting context clues about what they're supposed to be doing. Or if they're really lost, they can ask a friend, hey, what are we doing? Or you can hear the lecture face-to-face with visuals, usually on a board, a whiteboard. You have manipulatives that you do with your hands. You have multi-layers of learning that is happening without your initiation. All you have to do is respond to it. All you have to do is just be in it. And so there's all these context clues. There's all this just really rich layers of complexity in terms of ways that you can learn things. So now let's switch that over to online learning. In online learning, there's no contextual clues. You might have a teacher you like, but your teacher is on a video, and so you don't even get to say, "Hey, how are you, Miss Hart?" You just have to like watch a talking head telling you about something new that you never heard of. You don't have any manipulatives in your hand. You don't have a friend to see what they're doing. You don't have any way to keep yourself on track. And then sometimes they have all these weird discussion boards. And that is the hardest thing for an ADHD kid because it doesn't make any sense. So they just start treating it clerically. And then what happens is they're like, well, I just have to get it done because it's a grade. And then they start putting things that may not even be related in the discussion board because they had to put something in the discussion board. But it's because it's not natural for an ADHD kid to read, 10 entries on a topic and then be able to thoughtfully respond to that. They can get through maybe 3 and they're like, I'm done. So it's contraindicated. It's not their best way to work. And when we have kids, I remember somebody saying this to me when I was in my 20s and I got so mad. And here I am telling it to people in my 50s. There are going to be some years that your kids don't learn as much as other years. I mean, that's just the way it is. And this is probably going to be one of them. And so what you do is you keep in mind that it's not helpful to learn online for most of these kiddos. You look at and pay attention to when they are at their best. For a lot of ADHD kids, they're at their best between about 9:30 and 11:30 because they wake up slowly and then they lose their focus in the afternoon. If you have your child on a ADHD medication, you might want to ask if you can have a short acting amount of medication so that they only have about 4 hours of focus. And then you and the child can work together to get what you can get done during that time. I recommend even to my college students that they only work 2 hours at a time, switching either subjects or modality of learning every 30 minutes. So if you have a kid much younger than that, you want to break that down even further, where you have maybe 45-minute working sessions with 15 minutes per subject in there. And think of yourself as less is more. If they're getting some of it in them and they're still happy learning, that is the biggest goal. It's not that they finish everything. And if you have accommodations through your school, you can draw a line, or keep some documentation and say, this is how much my child was able to do, and this is when it became too difficult for them to sustain. And then you can work with your disability services at your school so that they can see you did your best. So I would leave the afternoons for free play outside, for creativity time, for things like that, so that both the parent and the student know there's going to be a very short, limited time where you have to stick to it. And then the last thing I would recommend is sometimes if you have like an 8-year-old and you help set that up with an 8-year-old, you think to yourself, well, they should be able to do it independently, right? I sat down with them, they know exactly what they have to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But all ADHD kids are 3 years behind in social and emotional maturation, and 3 years behind in their judgment.
Wow.
So you're really leaving a 5-year-old with a screen and a set of instructions. So if you and your partner can just remind each other over and over and over that you're not really dealing with the 8-year-old body, you're dealing with the 5-year-old mind, or the 10-year-old body or the 7-year-old mind, kind of keep that in perspective, then it'll make more sense how much support you'll need to provide. For a third or fourth or even fifth grader, you're probably going to need to sit with them while they do the work, because it gets too lonely to them to sit longer than 10 or 15 minutes. They never have to sit alone at school. And so
Wow, this
they're
is
going to need,
so helpful.
yeah, so they're going to need you to sit there with them. And you may have to sit there with them and help get them started. And then you can work on your stuff. And as long as they see you working and they're working, that kind of body doubling can be very, very comforting. And it can help the anxiety go down. It can help the ADHD crystallize a little bit in its focus. But you may have to, the younger they are, literally just sit with them like as if you were their tutor. And that's why you want to do less, not more.
That you've just shared so many amazing, wonderful, helpful contextualizing things for best helping these kids and yourself. And because the thing that's coming to mind is a lot of parents are working at home. So that thing you just said about setting them up and thinking that they should be fine to go on their own, bringing in the emotional age component and social age component is so crucial. When you put it the way you did, it's so clear. And with working at home, it's a big strain on parents. They have to go to meetings, they have things to do. So the idea of making the time shorter, but much more effective and productive, and
Yeah.
also just nourishing, it sounds like nourishing the child's learning skills rather than the material that they're learning.
Yes, if you can focus away from the achievement in terms of how much they did or what their grade was, and focus more on their learning and their love of learning, it can actually neutralize some of the shame they have around not doing as well as their peers or not doing as well as they think they should have.
That's such a great thing for them going forward, to become healthy humans.
Yeah, I mean, I do that even with my college students. I catch a lot of college students who failed out of school, and we spend the first couple months kind of working through the shame of that, and trying to reconnect them to their love of learning, because the love of learning will give you an internal motivational drive. And kids who have ADHD, their external motivational drive is all about relevance. And if something doesn't feel or seem relevant to them, they're just not going to have that motivation. So if they can see that it can be enjoyable to learn, that it can be fun, that it's fun to use your brain, then they'll have more of an internal motivation to do the work, even if it isn't something of high interest for them.
And that will carry them down the road so much more successfully than if they finished all their work.
Yes.
It's the way you put it, it's so clear. Let's see. Oh, I know what else. I heard you say earlier on, it's going back to the beginning, the way you set up the context for kids doing school at home is so crucial and really needs to be heard. It's parents are challenged, families are challenged to try to normalize this not normal situation we're in. And it's really important to recognize that school at home is so different from school at school in so many ways.
That's right.
And I thought you contextualized that so beautifully. I really appreciate that. I think that will be very helpful, and also just gives the context for some of the actions that might feel like it's not what I'm supposed to do as a parent. They have to do all their work. They're going to fall behind. All the voices that come in they're out of wanting the best for our kid, but a lot of them are also coming to us from a place of our own anxiety. And
exactly. Right.
To understand how different it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we all want what's best for our kids, and And I think that the way it happened is like, we're going to do online learning, and the teachers will be available to help, and there'll be videos on there. And then it just kind of made it seem like it was going to be easy, you know, and because the schools really didn't know how it would go. It's all an experiment, because
Mm-hmm.
that nobody knows how this is going to turn out. We know now, we've had some studies come through that said, you know, it didn't work too well, but we're still going to have to do it in the fall for public safety. For the elementary schools, what I'm seeing is they're probably going to do something where they go part-time to school and part-time stay at home for online learning, so that they can do deep cleans in the schools. And in the college setting, a lot of the colleges are going to start a touch early and then finish by November, so that the kids won't be traveling back and forth and possibly spreading anything that way. So it's going to stay different. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I had a friend who sent me an email, and she's a good friend. I've known her for 15 years. And she said, I set up a homeschooling schedule for my kid based on what the school recommended, and I would like your feedback on it. And it was literally something different, 30 minutes a day for 6.5 hours a day. And she herself is a teacher, and her husband works full time. And I said to her, so I texted her back or emailed her back, and I said, well, which one of you are going to quit working to do this? Because this requires a full-time professional.
Yeah.
And she wrote me back and she said, thank you. It was like, it just did. She felt like she was supposed to somehow keep that going while she was still making her videos and monitoring her own classroom. And I told her, I said, just go into bare minimum mode. And she said that I've talked to her since then, and she said when she went into bare minimum mode, the resistance melted. And she said her daughter's afternoons became, she would take a small concept in science or something, and she'd be like, hey, Mama, do you think I can do a project around this? And she said she was ended up doing academic things in her play because she had enough time to explore. Now, if your
What?
kid isn't that self-motivated, that's okay. But that is a benefit, is that you can have more time sometimes to go more deeply into material independently through fun.
Yes. What a wonderful way to come to conclusion today with our interview. It brings in it brings in another of the core principles of parenting beyond words is the better you do, the better your child does. So
Yeah.
having the amount of stress it takes for some parents who have are working, like the crush of hats on their head is just like crushing them down. That to bare minimum allows the parent to be less stressed. And when the parent is less stressed, the child is less stressed, and the pushback and the behavior challenges and all of that diminish, actually. The connection stays stronger, and to emerge at the end of this crisis with a strong connection with your child, I believe is the most important thing that you can come out with.
I agree.
And this stress and the pressure can really disrupt that. So I love that connection more than the perfection of following all the rules exactly. Connection and keeping the stress at home as minimized as possible, and the parents having permission to do what they need to do, to focus on, like I said, what I believe is the most important thing, the relationship, both with themselves, with their whole family, and with individual children and their partner, if there is one. All the relationships, that's what is going to keep us intact. So
I agree.
thank you for how beautifully you put all that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for interviewing me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's delightful, and I think it will be so helpful to my parents and families that I work with.
Mm-hmm.
I want to let people know how they can like get in touch with your support. So I'm just again going to read it because the way you said
Sure.
it. So your website is Coaching with Hart, HART,
Yes.
all one word, .com.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to stay in touch with Tina is to get valuable information like what you've heard today, is to sign up for her monthly newsletter, which they can do on your website, right?
Right.
And this fall, she'll be offering a twice a month support group for parents who are either anticipating or actually living with a new empty nest. So that sounds like a new venture. Yes?
Yes. Yeah. Some people asked me to do it, and I'm so grateful because it's been fun getting ready for it.
So yeah, so your creative juices are flowing too. And
Yes.
so if that describes you, get in touch with Tina. That's very specific and clear. And let's free our own and our child's creativity and love of learning by how we
Yes.
relate to these challenging times.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you. I appreciate it.